working drummer.
Now kick it.
This is the Working Drummer Podcast, serving up perspectives, experiences, and stories from ground-level working pros. Advice, tips, and secrets on how to build a career in the music business.
Hello, everybody. This is Matthew Krause, and you are listening to the podcast Working Drummer. Today is my guest, drummer Jack White. Jack is best known for his work worldwide with singer-songwriter Rick Springfield. In the 40-plus years that Jack's been playing drums, he's worked with many other artists, including Mitch Ryder, Ike and Tina Turner, Sam the Sham, Rare Earth, the Knack, Steppenwolf, and Roger Miller, just to name a few. Jack's other creative pursuits include acting and announcing for iHeart Radio. As always, you can go to workingdrummer.net where you can find out more information about this and other episodes of the podcast that we've done. You can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. You can subscribe to our podcast on iTunes. If you would, please go there and rate and review our podcast. It really helps us out a ton. This episode of Working Drummer Podcast is sponsored by OnlineDrummer.com. OnlineDrummer.com provides drummers of all ages and skill levels with the best educational resources, including videos, sheet music, ebooks, articles, Skype lessons, and more. OnlineDrummer.com puts all these tools at your fingertips to help you improve your playing. Working Drummer Podcast listeners can get a free download of the sheet music of your choice by visiting OnlineDrummer.com and entering the promo code WorkingDrummer. No dots, no spaces. Again, go to OnlineDrummer.com and enter the promo code WorkingDrummer for one free download of the sheet music of your choice. Get practice tips, build your chops, work out new styles, or learn your favorite song today at OnlineDrummer.com. So let's get to it. Here is Jack White. First of all, shout out to David Black for introducing us.
Yeah, what a sweet guy.
Yeah, super awesome. Well, huge props to him.
Paid a tribute to me when he met me that blew me away, and I never ceases to amaze me.
That's awesome.
I'm lucky that I've gotten to meet some of these young drummers that treated me like I treated Ringo when I met him. I mean, we all love Ringo, but most of our Rick Springfield audience was girls in the early '80s.
Yeah.
But then later on, people caught up with it, and I was surprised to find out how many guys were like fans that saw us live, and we were much more powerful live than we were on record. So.
Some great YouTube videos, man, of you guys playing.
Live,
awesome.
the live stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were a great band.
Yeah, it's cool.
I remember some of the heavy bands that were out, used to come to see us play, and they'd be so skeptical. Oh my God, you could just feel it. Like, really? Like Def Leppard and Van Halen, and because we'd be getting into the arena a day before they were going to be there, so they didn't have anything to do. Let's go see this, soap opera star.
Right.
He wasn't. He was a musician way before that.
But he
just took that because he needed money.
He was on, what was it, General Hospital?
Yeah, but he only took that because we were broke, and we had just made the record, and we didn't know what was going to happen. And he called me up one day, and he goes, man, they're offering me $2,000 a week. Should I do it, Jack? And I said, that's a lot of money, man. And we didn't know.
And
that kind of did two things. It maybe it increased the audience of women, but it ruined his credibility.
Really?
Everybody thought he was a soap star turned singer. Guy'd been recording albums since 1971.
Yeah, as opposed to the opposite.
I met him in '76 and toured with him for a year, and nothing happened, but we stayed in touch. But so Rolling Stone would never do an interview with him.
He was plagued
and
with...
people would come and see us live. These bands, like I said, would come and see us, and I could see. I would watch them I could see them just change their attitude.
Yeah. A lot of energy, man. Just a lot. It's cool. I mean, do you feel like having this technology now that you're finding videos that maybe you haven't seen in years?
Right. I get sent stuff all the time.
Yeah.
I go, wow.
Yeah, that's cool.
I mean, I probably have all that stuff on VHS tape. I don't think there's anything that I did. There's no rehearsal that I didn't record. There's no show I didn't record. I have thousands and thousands of those Some of those date back to 1970.
So we're looking at a wall of cassettes over here.
There's Ike and Tina Turner rehearsals in there. There's every Rick Springfield rehearsal. I was a big... Are we recording?
Yeah, man.
Okay, good. I didn't know. I mean, that's not wasted time. But I was a big believer in... Because I didn't have any formal training. I just started playing along with records in 1960 when I was 6 years old. And I didn't have any formal training. And the way I taught myself was to listen to myself.
Yes.
And everything that I did, I record. I had a little tape recorder behind me, and I listened. Every night I would listen to what I did that day, and I took it very seriously. And I'd say, oh, don't do that again, or, oh, wow, that's a great fill.
Remember that
and
one?
then my first thought would be, how did you do that? And then and so that's the way I molded my playing.
Yeah.
And I never, even in the beginning when I was 6, the first thing that my parents bought me at 6 years old, after seeing my cousin play, and I wanted to be a drummer, in his basement. The first thing they bought me was a practice pad and a metronome. I still have that wooden metronome.
Yeah.
And so, and I got lessons at Peralta Music Studio in Detroit, and I learned stupid things like bossa novas and rumbas from this old guy, and then I got really bored really fast. But the one thing that I got out of that was he kept stressing how important time was.
Yeah.
And so I've never ever played without that being the most important thing.
Sure.
And because I didn't have any formal training to speak of, in the beginning, I couldn't really play any fills.
Wow.
I was always playing with people that were older than me. I thought that was... initially, when I started playing with bands and when I was 12, the first thing I felt was the most important thing was that I play with people that are better than me.
Yeah.
So that I can get better.
Right.
I never wanted to be the best guy in the band. I wanted to be with the best guys I could find.
Right.
And if they didn't accept me, it meant that I wasn't there yet, and I had to keep trying. And I always tried to achieve that. And
right.
that concept never changed with me. That was a concept that would run through my life and still does to this day.
Yeah.
Of throwing myself in the deep end and hoping I can swim.
Right.
And then making a point to swim.
Yeah.
Because it's swim or die.
And how's that worked?
It worked.
It worked.
It worked for me.
Yeah.
But the way that I improved quickly was to listen to myself.
Yeah.
I was my worst critic. And I was really hard on myself.
Yeah.
And I never really believed when I was young that I belonged in the places that I was in. I started playing with famous people when I was 16.
Right.
My first famous artist was Mitch Ryder when I was 16 years old.
What was that like?
It was...
Did you know who he was?
It was, oh, yeah. I went to concerts. I used to sneak into concerts in Detroit, the Grande Ballroom and the Fairgrounds and the Easttown Theater when I was 14. I'd hitchhike down there after my dad went to sleep. And I would and watch these bands from backstage.
Right.
And nobody questioned why I was there. I don't think you can get away with that today as much, but...
Maybe not.
Sometimes I would grab a piece of equipment when nobody was looking and take it through the doorway.
Yeah.
Or just walk in and like go, hey guys, how you doing? Like I own the place or something.
Yeah.
And I think everybody thought I was like somebody's kid,
Right.
Because I always looked really, I looked like I was about 10. And nobody questioned me. And I stood backstage and watched some of the greatest bands in the world. And I'd say there's about a half a dozen bands that I saw during that period that I ended up playing drums for. Later on.
Was Mitch one of those?
And Mitch was one of them. And the way that I met Mitch Ryder was I snuck in backstage to a Bob Seger concert. And I was such a little hustler. And I don't remember to this day how I got his home phone number, but I did. Probably from one of the crew guys. I don't know. I don't know how. I can't remember that part of it. But I remember calling Bob Seger on the phone. I said, "Hey, Bob, it's Jack White." He said, "Yeah, man, what can I do for you?" I said, "Well, I saw you play last night, and I just want you to know that I think that I should be your drummer." I was 16 years old. And he laughed.
Yeah.
And he said, "Is that right?" And I said, Yep. I think that you and I'd be a good match." Something stupid like that.
Yeah.
And he goes, "Do you know how to play a shuffle?" I didn't know what a shuffle was. I said, "Absolutely." And he goes, "Well, I know. I wish you well," or something like that. And he hung up the phone. And a couple days later, I called him back. And he said, "Look, kid, I don't know how you got my number, but if you ever call me again, I'm going to hunt you down and beat your ass." I was devastated. I was absolutely devastated for about 4 hours.
Yeah.
And then I went, "I'll call Mitch Ryder." And I'd seen Mitch Ryder in Detroit play, Johnny Bedanchik, one of my favorite drummers in the world, that recorded Devil with the Blue Dress On when he was 16.
Wow.
I'd seen Mitch Ryder, Little Richard called Mitch Ryder the greatest white rock and roll singer of all time. Now, and there's another blank spot. Within an hour, I had Mitch Ryder's home phone number, and I have no idea how I got it.
Yeah.
I can only imagine what this 16-year-old kid was like to do that. How did I do that?
Yeah.
I have no idea. But I called him up, and I gave him the same spiel that I gave Bob.
Yeah.
And he laughed like Bob did.
Yeah.
Only he said, "Well, I guess we should meet then." I went, "What? We should do what?" I just about fell off the chair.
He called your bluff, man.
Yeah. Well, this is the really interesting thing. He said, "Come on over. I want to meet you." He lived in my apartment building, and I didn't even know it.
Oh, wow.
I was at his door in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And he talked to me for a long time.
Yeah.
And he was kind to me.
Yeah.
He was like a big brother to me, And he said, "Well, I want to give you an audition." And he auditioned me along with a few other guys.
Yeah.
And this was a period of time for Mitch where he had sort of quit singing for a while, didn't know if he really wanted to do it, but he thought he'd put a band together and play some clubs around Detroit, just to keep himself busy. Lucky for me. And he gave me the job.
Nice.
And I was not good enough.
Huh.
And that's not what it was about for him at that time. At that time, he wanted to give me a break. But it wasn't luck, you see. It was me just not taking no for an answer.
Right.
It was me willing to risk being embarrassed, to risk getting rejected,
Yeah.
and not caring.
Right.
And that's the way I was. And I think that's the way I still am, except for when it comes to girls.
That's a completely different
They scare me more than any.
Oh, my gosh.
They scare me way more than any band. But the fact is that I played with him for about 6 months, and then he quit and went to Denver and took a year and a half off. He's back out there singing now, and he's better than ever, and he mentioned me in his book that he wrote recently. Shortly thereafter, I played in some local Detroit bands.
Well, can I ask you real quick, that experience with Mitch, did that kind of solidify that attitude that, you know what, if I don't take no for an answer, see what I've accomplished, and maybe this is the way I'm going to achieve success for the rest of my life?
It was exactly what I thought.
Yeah.
And one of the other feelings that I had was, if I can do this without being good enough, Imagine what I can do if I get better at this.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's when I realized the fusion of determination and perseverance were the keys to everything. And I read this one time when I was 15 years old. It was in a speech by Herbert Hoover. And I wrote it down. Determination and perseverance alone are omnipotent to making success. It's not talent. It's not education. It's not money. You see, and I believe this, that with determination and perseverance, the talent will come.
Right.
Eventually.
Yeah.
The education will come eventually. But you must stay determined. But the key, determination doesn't work without perseverance. Because along the way you get rejected.
Yeah.
And I believe that it's what we do with that rejection that makes the difference in our character.
Right.
Because I can't tell you how many people I've seen that get rejected that give up. Or they give up for too long and they never get back to it.
Right.
Or it just makes them feel so less than that when they do get back to it, they don't have enough confidence. So I believe that perseverance is almost a little more important than the determination part.
You've got a great plaque out on your front porch. Do you remember what it says? It's along that line. Handling success and handling failure in the same. It's not those words, but it's
and treat those imposters both the same.
That's the ending line right there. I love that.
My father gave me that. That was a poem by Rudyard Kipling.
Yeah.
And you have to treat success and disaster as the same thing. Treat those imposters both the same. In other words, they're both illusions.
Yes, imposters.
Success is an illusion. And failure is an illusion.
Yeah.
Except for those who embrace them.
Yeah.
And it's dangerous to embrace either one.
Right. Right.
It's just as dangerous to embrace success.
Right.
Too closely.
Yeah.
As it is failure.
Sure.
I mean, and I don't care what you do. I don't care if you're playing drums. I don't care if you're a football player. I don't care if you're a teacher. I don't care what you do for a living. I really, truly believe in my heart that is the key to the whole thing of this life.
Yeah.
And staying happy and passionate about what we're going to do or what we're doing.
Right.
And I had the fortune of working on TV shows during my career with the great actor George Burns, comedian George Burns, the actor. And the last time I saw George Burns, he was 98 years old.
Good Lord.
And I was with my wife backstage at the Golden Globe Awards in L.A. And I had worked with him the first time back in the 70s and then again in the 80s. This was in the 90s. I walked up to George. He was in his tux. He had smoking a cigar. He had two beautiful women on each side of him. And he was about to go on stage. And as I was walking up to him, I didn't even know what I was going to say. And I walked up and I said, "Mr. Burns, my name is Jack White, and I've worked with you a couple of times." "Oh, hello there, son. How are you?" And he was like about 5 feet tall. And out of my mouth came what I thought was the stupidest question in the world. I said, "Can I ask you something?" And he said, "What is it, son? Anything." And I said, "Well, do you have the answer to a happy life, to living a long, happy life? Because you're obviously having one."
Yeah.
And as soon as I said it, I thought, what a stupid question. Really? And you know what? He smiled at me and he said, "That's a good question, son. I do have the answer to that. You got to wake up every morning and be passionate about what you're going to do that day."
Right.
Because we're supposed to wake up with "oh boy," not "uh-oh." And if you don't find yourself waking up that way, find something else to do. Because you're doing the wrong thing. And with that, they called his name, and I never saw the man again. But he lived to be 100 years old.
Amazing.
I thought that was one of the most profound things I ever heard in my life. I stood there numb for about 5 minutes.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe what I had just heard.
It's probably why he lived to be 100.
Probably.
Yeah.
And yet, it's so simple.
Yeah.
I think that I have had a tendency in my life to overcomplicate things and tell myself scary stories along the way and let other people dictate my own journey when, in fact, nobody's in control of my journey but me. In it, I think it's important for me to remember that. And as I'm about to turn 62 years old in a little less than 2 weeks. And as I get to this age,
March 12th,
I look back and I go, it was so much simpler than I made it out to be at times. And I wish I could write that kid a letter and tell him what he was going to run into. But knowing me, because now I have a 20-year-old son,
right?
I wouldn't read it.
Is your son like you?
And if I did, I'd crumble it up and throw it away and go, you don't know what you're talking about.
Is your son a lot like you?
He's exactly like me. He's a Pisces like me. He's an incredible drummer, incredible songwriter, guitar player, piano player. And he doesn't really, he worshipped me until he was 17 years old. And now I'm lucky if I can get him on the phone every 2 weeks. But when he was 3 years old, I was playing with Rick Springfield, and at 3 years old, I put earmuffs on him.
Right.
And I'd take him up in the arenas, 25,000 screaming people, and I'd set him on my drum riser. And I'd put these big earmuffs on him, and I'd hand him a bunch of sticks, and I'd say, son, whenever I need a drumstick, you just give me a drumstick. I gave him a job,
Yeah.
So he'd feel important.
Yeah.
And he was gone. I could see it in his eyes.
Yeah.
He was gone at that moment. He was just like I was.
Yeah.
I was a little older. I was 6, but the same thing happened to me. And I can't tell him anything, and nobody could have told me anything.
Yeah.
And I wish my father was still alive because I have a lot of questions for him. I wish I'd paid more attention.
Well, you're in good company, man. I mean, I think there's so many people that feel this way, and you reach a point in your life where you can spend a little time to reflect back and try and pass that on the best you can. And your son's going to have that epiphany as well. We all do. But between the ages of, 17 and 25, 30, we just think we know it all.
I know. Everybody tells me they're going to come back.
Yeah.
And I just keep saying, well, gee, I hope I'm still alive when they do. But I want to thank you, Matt, for having me do this today, because this is good for me, and this is a way for me to at least pass something on to somebody. If one person hears one thing that I say, and it makes a difference even for a moment in their life, I think that's really
well. You got one person.
You
got one person right here, man. I'm picking up on what you're saying, man. I hear it.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you for. I mean that.
Yeah, cool.
It's an honor to have anybody ask me anything at all.
I want to jump back to after Mitch Ryder.
After Mitch Ryder was a very interesting part of my life.
Yeah.
Like I said, I started working in a gas station after that. My dad and I lived on 8 Mile. My mother and father had divorced. I was living on 8 Mile Road. My father had one hand because he lost one in World War II. So we were very poor. Nobody wanted to hire my dad. By this time, I had been to like 7 different high schools, moving around a lot. And now I lived with my father in an apartment. I worked in a gas station across the street. It was dangerous, to say the least. Some bad things were happening to me on the streets. I was putting bands together, but it was hard to get jobs. I would get jobs in club bands. And back in those days, when you got a job in a club band, you had to do 6 or 7 sets. You'd have to do 5 nights of 5 sets a night, and then on the weekends you had to do the after-hours sets as well. and my hands would bleed. I didn't have calluses yet, and I didn't have good technique, and my hands would bleed. And I call those my in the trenches years. And I finally went to my dad in the middle of the 11th grade. Now, I saw a lot of things happening on TV, and by reading those liner notes that we talked about, I saw that a lot of my favorite records were being made out in Los Angeles. I'd never been to Los Angeles, and I haven't really been that many places yet, but I went to my dad one night, and I said, Dad, listen, this is a dangerous place for me, and I want to quit high school, and I want to go to California and be a drummer. And again, you got to remember, I have no formal training. I have no reason to believe that I can go there and accomplish anything, except for that Mitch Ryder had believed in me. And I couldn't stop thinking about that. If this guy, who had a #1 hit-selling record, believed in me, there must be something there, and I need to go find out what it is.
Yeah.
And I know I can do this.
Yeah.
I was a very determined young kid.
Yeah.
You know. But my father didn't say a word. Not a word. And I went to bed. And I just thought to myself, well, that was weird. He didn't say anything. But he got me up at 6 a.m. I could smell breakfast was being made. And he said, come to the kitchen. I want to talk to you. And I went to the kitchen, and my father said, I've been up all night. And he said, I think this is the best thing for you to do. And I want you to go pack your things. Let's have some breakfast, and I'm going to drive you down to Toledo and give you a head start. And I was in shock. And I had to ask myself, was I serious when I said that? And I did. I packed my backpack, and we had breakfast, and my father drove me 50 miles south, put me on the 80 West Freeway ramp, got out of the car with me, and for the first time in my life, I saw a tear in his eye. And he reached in his pocket and gave me the last $100 that he had to his name.
Wow.
And he said, good luck, son. I know you're going to make it. Now, this is the days before cell phones, so I didn't know when I'd talk to him again or when I'd see him again. And with that, he drove off. And I sat there and I watched his car disappear on the horizon. I stood there for 20 minutes in shock. And I stuck my thumb out. And 8 days later, I arrived in Hollywood. It was 1971. And I had $60 left.
Wow.
And all I can tell you is this. I never slept in the streets. And I never had to do another job except play drums.
Yeah.
For the next 45 years.
Jeez.
I did do other jobs later in life because I wanted to.
Yeah.
There were things I wanted to explore, like acting and announcing on radio and photography. But it wasn't, I didn't need to.
Right.
Those were just things that I wanted to branch out in. But I made a living.
Yeah.
And basically I walked up and down the streets of Hollywood every day, asking every human being I saw if they knew anybody that needed a drummer. Now, you got to remember, I don't have any drums.
Right.
The only thing I have is this credit, this Mitch Ryder credit, which at 17 years old, I threw that around a lot.
Sure, why not?
That's all I got, sure. And I met a couple girls that let me sleep on their floor. That took care of my housing for a minute. And then I ran into some guy that said there's a job at a frat house tonight. It pays $15 and all the beer you can drink, and they've got drums there. I wished I'd had enough money to call my dad and say I got my first job. This is about 3 weeks after getting there. And at that party, the bass player, I'm asking everybody. I still keep asking everybody I see who needs, the bass player said Sam the Sham is looking for a drummer. Now, he had a hit song called Wooly Bully.
Yeah.
And Little Red Riding Hood.
Yeah.
And it was Sam the Sham and the Pharaohs. Mm-hmm. And I remembered them from when I was a kid. And I got all excited. I said, can you help me get an audition? to make a long story short, I auditioned for Sam. I got the job, and Sam let me live with him.
Wow.
His name was Domingo Zamudio, and he was a gentle, kind man. And he was 20 years older than me, and he talked like this, and he's from Texas. He was a Mexican man from Texas, and he was very kind. I worked with him for about 5 months, and then he dropped the bomb on us that he was going to go back to Texas. And I panicked because now I needed a place to live and a job. And we were at the Whiskey A Go-Go when it happened, and I was in the dressing room, and I immediately went into that mode. Do you know anybody looking for a drummer? Do you know anybody looking for a drummer? And this is a really important part of my career because this was going to be, the next month was going to change everything. Mm-hmm. So this is the most critical turn of my life. I see this beautiful black woman across the dressing room. And I don't know who she is, but I know a lot about history of music by this time.
Yeah.
I know names. I know records. Man, I knew every record from the 60s and who did them. I knew everything, but I didn't recognize people sometimes. And I walked up to her and I said, hey, you just saw me play with Sam and I'm looking for a job. I said, do you know anybody looking for a drummer? And she goes, oh, well, yeah, honey, I do, as a matter of fact. And you were great, by the way. Now, you got to remember, at this time, I still don't know how to do any fills, but I've got great time.
Yeah.
And I've got one of the most consistent backbeats, which is what everybody loved about me.
Yeah.
It's because that's all I knew how to do. So I did it with all my heart.
Right.
And it worked.
Right.
And I said, who? And she said, Ike and Tina Turner. And I thought I was going to faint.
Yeah.
That was one of the bands that I saw when I was 15 in Detroit.
Sure.
And that might have been the greatest R&B band of all time at that point, along with Sly and the Family Stone.
Yeah, yeah.
Those are the two greatest R&B bands in history up to that point.
Who was this?
And
one?
Otis Redding.
Yeah.
Otis Redding had a great horn band, and let's not forget Wilson Pickett. Some of the guys that had great bands, but Ike and Tina had a different kind of energy that was more ferocious, more powerful than anything I'd ever seen in person. And she said, just tell them Claudia Lanier sent you. And I went, oh my God, are you kidding me? I'm talking to Claudia Lanier. Now, Claudia Lanier, for those of you who don't know, was one of the original Ikettes who sang on Proud Mary. Mm. And at the time when I walked up to her, she was married to Leon Russell. Wow. And I knew all that. And I couldn't believe it. And I called down there the first thing the next morning, and I said, I understand you're looking for drummers. And they said, well, auditions are closed. This is the last day. We've been auditioning drummers all week. And I said, well, Claudia Lanier sent me. And she said, hold on the phone a second. And she comes back a couple minutes later, and she says, all right, get down here right now, but you'll be the last one we hear.
Yeah.
So now by this time, I've bought a set of drums, from playing with Sam, for $175 at the drum shop, and now I'm starting to, and I've got some clothes now, and I've got
right,
I've made some money, so I think I'm doing great. I mean, I'm like eating every day.
Yeah, it's a good
I don't have a car yet, but I'm eating. I got everything else, and Sam actually gave me a ride down there, and I walked in the room, and I was the only white guy in the building. And there were about 20, no, not 20. I think there were about 10 black guys waiting to audition in the hall. Mm-hmm. And I walked up and I introduced myself to the lady behind the desk. And she said, have a seat. It's going to be a while. And I sat down. I looked up and I looked at these guys, and they were just staring me down like, You got to remember at this time, at 17 years old, I look like I'm about 10.
Yeah.
And I'm white. Mm-hmm. I'm really white.
And your name is White.
But I'm from Detroit. And so one of the things that I learned in Detroit was never let anybody see you're afraid. Mm. You can be scared to death, but don't let them see that. So, here I am trying to act tough and everything. So I just ignore them. And but I almost left 3 times because I swear, drummers, when I could hear the band playing. I mean, this big 16-piece horn band with 5 horns, 5 of the tightest horns I've ever heard, with the exception of Tower of Power, which came a little later.
Right.
But I could hear them rehearsing. I could hear them. And some of these drummers were amazing. And I almost left. I just went, what's the point? And then I thought, no, go on in there. At least you can say you played one song with Ike and Tina, and that'll be cool.
Yeah.
They went through all those drummers, and then it was my turn. And I walked in. I didn't need drums. They had drums there. They told me that. And I walked in, and Soko Richardson, the original drummer, was leaving to go to play with John Mayall, and he was really nice. Big, heavy-set black guy with a bald head. And this black band, this horn band with, it was like Tina and Ike were not in the room. Neither were the background singers. So there was about 11 guys there, and or 10, whatever it was. And I could see them rolling their eyes when I came in, and they were tired. I could tell they were tired.
Yeah, you were the last guy.
They were exhausted.
Yeah.
And now this little white kid's going to come in here? Are you kidding me? I could see it in their faces. And I went, okay, all right. And Soko was really nice. He'd move anything you want, make yourself comfortable. So we sit down and we play a song. And there's a little bit of a silence at the end. I wish I could remember what song it was, but to be honest with you, I was so scared. I can't remember anything. Claude went. The band leader, the trumpet player, Claude Williams, he said, you stay right there. He went and he got Ike Turner. And Ike Turner walked in the room wearing a black leather trench coat with a fur collar and sunglasses with diamonds around the side.
Yeah.
And next to him was a guy named Blue wearing a purple matching suit with a hat and patent leather shoes. An old guy. And Ike didn't talk to anybody. He talked to Blue, and then Blue would tell you what he said.
Nice.
And I'm sitting here at the drums going, I'm looking around, I'm looking left, I'm looking right, I'm looking at Ike, I'm going, what's going on here? This is bizarre.
Yeah.
I've never seen anything like this in my life. And I'm scared shitless. I'm scared to death. And like I said before, nobody's going to know that. I'm not going to let anybody know that. But I am really intimidated, beyond a doubt. So, as we're playing, Blue calls out some song that Ike whispers to him. And as we're playing the song...
So did you know these songs? I mean, a lot of times you're given material to audition.
I knew them from hearing them on the record. I know that they were cover songs. Tina did a lot of cover songs. She did Wilson Pickett. I think one of them was Land of a Thousand Dances by Wilson Pickett.
Okay.
Which is a really fast tune. And I know we didn't do Proud Mary that day. I know we might have played Oop Oopadoo, because that's an easier one. And then I think it was Land of a Thousand Dances, if I'm not mistaken, which is a lot like some of the records I grew up listening to on the radio in Detroit.
Yeah.
And I played with Mitch Ryder with Devil with the Blue Dress, was a lot like that. Mm-hmm. I can't play any fills, but I'll make that thing feel really good. Now, one of the things that was to my benefit was that these horn players were so good and so tight. You'd have to be an idiot not to be able to play.
Sure.
You'd have to be a cripple not to be able to play with these guys. I'm not kidding. They were so in your face with that sound.
Yeah.
That I just
fall into it.
Oh, it was like following a metronome. Just stay right here, man.
Right.
Don't worry about the fills. Just make this thing feel good.
Yeah.
And I used what I knew was my best attribute, and I just stayed right there in the pocket, and it worked because, except for one thing, at the end of the song, Ike has been staring at me, this whole time from 10 feet in front of the drums, and I start to ignore him, and just look at the other guys because he's scaring me. And so I'm so nervous that at the end of the song, I actually stand up behind the drums and I say, all right, everybody, that sounded pretty good. Let's do another one. And I go, oh, no, Jack, did you just say that out loud? Oh, my God. And I turn around and I start to pack up because I don't even want to hear what's coming next. And I know it's over.
Yeah.
I mean, really? You know, I didn't know a lot about Ike Turner at that time. Not as much as I was about to find out, and not about as much as we've all found out since.
Right, sure.
But anybody would have been, you know, pissed off some kid. But the thing that I learned as I get older, the things you can get away with at 17,
right?
When you're 35, they'll kill you for it. When you're 17, they think you're cute.
Yeah. So his reaction was,
he left the room with Claude. Oh no, wait. Hold on, let me back up. He said, "That's the first time I heard his voice."
Yeah.
That was the first time I heard his voice, and I heard Ike Turner go, "All right, play another one." And I went, "You've got to be kidding me." I'm packing up, dude. I'm back here packing up.
Yeah.
I turn around and I'm in shock. Play another one? After what I just did? And we played another one. And then he and Claude and Blue left the room. And Claude called me out in the hallway. And I walked out in the hallway, and I think I'm shaking. You know, I'm trying not to shake. I'm in shock.
Yeah.
And Claude says to me, "Ike says you got the job, but you got to change your attitude." And so the next day I showed up for my first rehearsal with Tina Turner, who ran the rehearsals. Ike was not there. Tina ran everything.
Yeah.
And that's when my difficulty began, because she went out and got Ike and brought Ike into the room, pointed at me, and said, "He's not good enough. He can't play the fills that we need." And Ike just looked at her. I'm not going to tell you exactly what he said, but it was basically, he wasn't really nice to her, let's put it that way.
Right,
he said, "You teach him what to do. That's my drummer. I don't care if you have to stay after rehearsals to do it." Mm-hmm. And with that, he walked out of the room. And she was pissed. She was angry. Mm-hmm. All right. And I'm thinking, oh, God, this is not the way I wanted to join any band. This is terrible. I mean, I worshiped this woman. And for her to feel this way about me was just crushing.
Yeah.
And for the next 3 weeks, she beat me up verbally and every which way you can think of. And she would stop 30 seconds into a song and start yelling at me. She did it for 3 weeks. For 3 weeks, I didn't sleep. I was living in an apartment with somebody. I couldn't set up my drums and practice, but I had pillows on a table, and I went home every night and sat there trying to do those fast rolls that you do in Proud Mary.
Yeah.
Because you see, that was it was part of the choreography with the dancers.
Sure.
When they did that swimming thing, you had to roll around the toms.
Yeah.
Well, I couldn't roll around the toms like that.
Yeah.
I had to learn, and I had to learn now.
Fast.
And every single day that I went to that studio, and I had to get a ride from my buddy, every day, and then I'd have to go home and sit up all night and just do it over and over and over and over. And I thought I was going to drop. And after 3 weeks, she walked up to me and she said, when you came in this band, you weren't good enough. And I kind of looked down and said, "Yeah, I know." And she said, "Well, I've never seen anybody work so hard. You're doing a great job." And she walked away, and I floated home and slept for the first time in 3 weeks. And I said, "Wow, I'm in Ike and Tina Turner's band."
Yeah.
And I still credit her to this day as the person who really taught me how to play. And she didn't give me my passion. She opened me up.
Yeah.
and taught me how to get around the drums. She didn't sit there and teach me how to do it. She demanded that I do it, and it was up to me to learn. But if it hadn't have been for that experience, I don't think my career would have gone quite the way it did, because after that, I joined I was with them for a year and a half, and I played on the last record they ever made as a duo.
Oh, wow.
Called Baby Get It On.
Okay.
On United Artists. It would be my first record that I ever cut, and it would be the last one they ever cut as a duo.
Yeah.
And that's history.
Yeah.
I had no idea I was making history at the time.
Yeah.
But it's history. And here's the 45 to prove it.
That's great.
But I went from one famous band to another after that. All I had to do was say I played with Ike and Tina, and sometimes I didn't even have to audition. There's a really great ending to the story about my dad dropping me off at the freeway.
Yeah.
6 years later, my dad would watch me play in front of 20,000 screaming kids in Detroit. And I sent a limousine to get him, and he'd never been in one.
When you were with, who were you with?
Rick Springfield.
Oh, great. Yeah.
So, was it 6? It might have been a little longer than that.
Yeah, but still.
I don't
That's
know.
amazing.
But that's, I really wanted to mention that because, had my dad not had the courage to do that, and it did take courage. I now have a son.
Right.
There's absolutely no way I would drop my son off on a freeway. But my dad was actually just trying to save my life.
Right.
And he was one of the guys that went down there and enlisted in the Army and became a pilot when the Japs bombed Pearl Harbor.
Yeah.
So I think that gave him character. And I think that he was giving me the same character by doing that. I finally left Ike and Tina because I couldn't stand watching the abuse. I couldn't stand being verbally abused, and by now I've learned a little bit about what's going on and who's getting paid what and how much the job is worth, and I was being way underpaid, and after a year and a half I quit.
Yeah.
My next job after that was Rare Earth.
Wow.
Audition for Rare Earth. The drummer was the lead singer. I mean, he left the band. They got Jerry LaCroix from White Trash and Frosty on drums from Lee Michaels' band. Frosty left the band. They needed a drummer. They were going out on the road right away. I auditioned for them one day. My friend Reggie McBride was playing bass from Detroit, who I knew from Detroit, who played with Stevie Wonder when he was 17.
Jeez.
He got me the audition, and I lasted a week. This is a great story because, every time I think about anything in my life, I was always thrown in the deep end. And let's see if this kid can swim, and I actually learned most of the songs on the airplane on the way to the first gig, opening up for the Ohio Players somewhere in Louisiana. And I'm sitting there, and I saw Edgar Winter's White Trash when I was a kid in Detroit. Jerry LaCroix was one of the horn players and singers. And I'm now going to play with Jerry LaCroix. Are you kidding me? And one of the greatest bass players, Reggie McBride, and the original Rare Earth. The rest of it was original. I was just blown away. And Rare Earth, of course, was from Detroit.
Yeah.
So I was learning the songs. Well, when they auditioned me the first day, we got to the song Get Ready, which was an old Temptations song that they had a big hit on. Yeah. And when it came to the end of the song, they just stopped playing and they said, and here's where you do a drum solo. Okay, let's wrap. Let's get all right, be at the airport tomorrow at 7 o'clock, and everybody went home. And I thought all night, drum solo? Whoa. This is even a little trickier than doing the fills around the toms.
Right.
What am I going to do?
Yeah.
And I listened to the original record, and I said, well, I can't do that because I don't really even know how to do that, so I got to do something. And I thought, what am I going to do? And the only thing I could do is copy this drum solo that I saw Donnie Brewer do with Grand Funk Railroad.
Wow.
Which made no sense in Get Ready, okay? Didn't even fit.
Yeah.
It was the only thing I could think of that was simple enough for me to do. So the first night, in front of 10,000 people, I made a fool out of myself when it came to the drum solo. And I was pretty embarrassed, and nobody talked to me. We did 3 gigs.
Yeah.
By the time we got to the 3rd gig, I was just completely devastated. I knew I was not good enough to, and sure enough, when we got home, I was fired. And so I lasted a week.
Yeah.
And they had no problem telling me, you can't do a drum solo. Sorry.
Yeah.
Your feel's great, but we need a drum solo, and you can't do one.
Yeah.
And so the next 6 months while I played in a club band,
Yeah.
I got a club gig right away to pay my rent and eat. For the next 6 months, I rented a room at the Union for $1. You could rent a room for $1 if you were a Union member.
Yeah.
And I took my drums. By this time, I had bought a car by now.
Okay.
During the period of time, I had an old 68 Cadillac. I thought that was pretty cool. Very appropriate Detroit mobile,
Sure.
And I would take my drums down to the Union and set my drums up and practice drum solos and find records with them and just practice over and over. And I vowed that would never happen to me again.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until 8 years later that anybody ever asked me to do one. But I was ready. Every dream that I ever had as a kid, from the time I saw the Beatles on Ed Sullivan and dreamed about becoming famous and having an experience of that, would come true with Rick, because you got to remember that by now, Redbone and Steppenwolf and Roger Miller and Glenn Campbell. I played with all these people and Rare Earth and Ike and Tina Turner, Mitch Ryder and Sam the Sham. And these people were all famous before I came along.
Right.
I never got a sense of what it was like to be part of something that became successful. I didn't get to see what it took to get there.
Yeah.
I just jumped in. So with Rick, it was different. I met Rick in 1976. He had an album out. One of the ways that I used to get gigs was we didn't have internet, we didn't have cell phones, we didn't have any of that. It was old school. It was the 70s. In 1976, I used to go around to the rehearsal halls in L.A. and the record companies and sit in the lobbies and ask the managers of rehearsal halls, is anybody in here auditioning drummers?
Oh, wow.
Or I'd sit in the lobby of Motown Records and say, and people would come in and I go, my name's Jack White. I played with Ike and Tina Turner. Do you know anybody looking for a drummer? Actually got a great session doing that one day and got to play with James Jamerson, the most famous bass player in the world.
Yeah, sure.
By doing that. But the day that I met Rick was the day I walked into Mars Rehearsal Hall on Melrose Avenue and asked that question, anybody auditioning drummers? Yeah, there's an Australian guy down the hall. His name is Rick Springfield, and he's got an album out called Wait for Night, and here it is. And he handed me the record, and I turned it over, and my favorite record at that time was Yellow Brick Road with Elton John.
Sure.
Dee Murray and Nigel Olsson were the rhythm section.
Yeah.
And Davy Johnstone was playing guitar.
Yeah.
I thought that was the most amazing band with Elton on piano. It was like, forget about it.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, Nigel Olsson and Dee Murray had played on this record with Rick Springfield.
Really?
And I took one look at that. I didn't know who Rick Springfield was. I took one look at that, and I said, I want an audition. And he goes, well, he's down the hall. You can go in and introduce yourself. And I walked in there, and I introduced myself to him. And he was real shy, and he was very nice. His girlfriend was sitting next to him, and he was in the middle of auditioning somebody. I kind of waited till they were finished the song, and I walked up and introduced himself. I want to come down and play with you. And he said, yeah, come back tomorrow at 1 o'clock. And so I went home and listened to the record, and I learned the songs that he told me to, and I came back the next day, and I got the gig.
Nice.
And I tried to play as much like Nigel as I could, but I also couldn't do that because I'm still me, right?
Right.
I still have my way of doing it, but I played Nigel's fills. I paid tribute to recordings, which I think people should do. We toured the country for a year in a 12-passenger van and played clubs, and nobody came to see us. And the album actually started to do well. I went on American Bandstand for the first time, and we did some press, and we were starting to get somewhere, actually, and then the label folded. And Rick and I had become very, very good friends by this point.
Yeah.
And we stayed friends. And he didn't have a license, so I used to drive him around, and he didn't have a car. He didn't know how to drive a car. And he lived in Hollywood, and I drove him around, and we went our different directions, and I played in some other bands.
Sure.
I started that band Player. We had a single called Baby Come Back. Okay. I played with Roger Miller. I was on Epic Records with Gary Myrick and the Figures. I did several other things in there. Lots of things in there. That's when I started acting. I signed with Disney and became an actor for a little while. And anyway, in 1980, Rick called me up. He goes, Jack, I wrote some great new songs. I said, I'll be right over. And I drove to his house in Glendale, and I went in, and he had a little tiny tape deck, a little tiny cassette recorder. This is still pre-Pro Tools, okay?
Yeah,
1980, still
sure.
Pre-everything.
Yeah, right.
We don't have cell phones yet. We don't have Pro Tools. We don't have, nothing digital. We're still old school. He's making his demos on a reel-to-reel 4-track in his living room, and using pillows for drums and hitting them. So he plays me this demo of Working Class Dog. Well, what would become Working Class Dog.
Yeah.
And I listened to the whole thing, and I loved it. And I could hear where he was going with it. I could hear what it should be.
Yeah.
I got it right away.
Yeah.
And the first thing I heard that I loved was Jesse's Girl. And I said to him, that's the single right there. And he said, no. It's this one over here, Hole in My Heart. And I said, no, I think you're wrong. And funny enough, in his autobiography that he put out, he says that I was the first one to know. And so when I say that that's the first, I mean, he asked me to put a band together.
Yeah.
Because I knew more players than he did. And so I put the band together, and we went in the studio and started. His manager owned Sound City.
Oh, cool.
Joe Gottfried and Tom Skeeter owned Sound City. They were managing him at the time. I went on a $250 a week salary, and I did all the work. I put the bands together. I rehearsed everybody. I did everything. Rick and I went in the studio. Neil Giraldo from Pat Benatar's band came in and helped us produce it, along with Bill Drescher, engineering. We got free studio time because his managers owned the place.
Right.
And we recorded Working Class Dog. And over the next year, I would watch that single. And of course, RCA Records. Then we got to deal with RCA Records after we cut the record, half the record. And then, again, Rick went off to do some other work, but put me in charge of the band. And he's my brother to this day. I'll tell you, he's the only guy that I've ever worked with in the business that actually took care of me and was fair to me and made sure that I was compensated for what I did. I would have done it for free, to be honest with you.
That's an encouraging story.
But he took care of me.
That's awesome.
We watched that thing climb the charts.
Yeah.
And I went from playing clubs in 1980 with him to theaters, to state fairs, to civic auditoriums and colleges, to sold-out arenas all over the world. Did 200 TV shows, did 10 videos, and sold 5 million albums or whatever it was, which was a lot in those days. And so when I say that that's how I felt success, I can't even begin to tell you what it was like to go from listening to this song on a tape recorder to being in these sold-out venues all over the world.
Right. To watch it grow, to be a part of the growth.
I'd be a part of the growth and feel the whole experience all the way.
That's amazing.
But that was an experience that I can't even describe. And if I knew when I got to the top with him, I knew that if I never did anything else in my life, this is what I dreamed of.
That's awesome, man.
It was so much more than joining a band that was already famous.
Yeah, for sure.
I felt like I earned this one.
I get that.
I earned it.
Yeah.
I fought for it.
Right.
Somebody saw me playing somewhere and suggested that I audition for this Disney movie. And Ron Miller, who was married to Walt Disney's daughter, was the president at the time, and he was running the auditions. And I went in there, and it's incredible because for the first film, you had to be able to play drums and act.
Yeah.
And Carlos Vega auditioned for it, one of my favorite drummers in the world.
Mine too, yeah.
But he couldn't act, and I was like a ham, and I looked like David Cassidy.
Yeah.
And he was a little rougher looking. By the way, he and I were very close. I have to tell you that I've never seen a better drummer, and there was no audition that I ever went to. If he was in line to audition, I might as well just pack up and go home because I'm not going to he's going to get it. And he did. He got every, he was one of the greatest drummers in LA at that time. This was the only gig that I got that he didn't get.
Oh, the acting gig.
I got this one because of the way I looked, and we would laugh about it. We laughed about it till he passed away, but we used to laugh about it. And say, yeah, remember that gig I took away from him? He'd start laughing. Anyway, I did that for 9 months, and I left to go play with Redbone, one of my favorite bands in the world, another band that I saw playing in Detroit. And I'm glad I did because that was one of the greatest bands I ever played in. And I toured with them for a year, and I just acting wasn't really resonating with me until 5 years ago.
I was going to say, if we fast forward to what
5 years ago, I started going to acting classes again. I found myself with some downtime out here on the ranch, and I was with a girl. I had a girlfriend that wanted to take acting lessons, and I said, well, I used to do that. I'll go with you. And I lost the girl somewhere along the way, but I kept up the acting classes. And then about, I don't know, how long's it been now? About 2 years ago, I got a role on Sons of Anarchy, and I did the last 2 episodes of the whole 7 years. And that, I was already in the Screen Actors Guild from years before, so that made it possible for me to do that. And I grew up in Detroit. I've been riding a Harley for a long, long time, or some form of motorcycle. And I was very familiar with that lifestyle.
Sure.
And that sort of anger and sort of tough guy thing.
Yeah.
I grew up in it. And since then, I've been doing really well. I've been having a lot of fun. I have no fantasies about becoming some famous actor, okay?
Yeah.
Just working once in a while.
Yeah.
And being able to study and learn.
And the show Nashville as well?
I was on Nashville as well. I did a scene with Chip Charles, who plays Deacon, and the girl that's, I'm sorry, I can't remember her name right now, but that was a good scene. And I did a couple of independent films, and I did a lot of auditions. And again, it's one of those things where you don't get every job you go after. It's okay,
But do you find that since you don't have aspirations to be a famous actor, that the auditioning process is different than it was when you were a drummer? Like, this is fun. I'm going to do this, but maybe the pressure's off.
I'm not intimidated by that process at all.
Yeah.
You know what? I've stared down Ike Turner. So, nobody behind a desk who, is going to scare me. I'm not scared when I go in there.
Yeah.
I look at it like a learning process, and I enjoy learning. And I've learned things about myself in acting. Now I got a job as an announcer on iHeart Radio, so I'm learning how to speak differently.
Wow.
And all that is the audio part of acting.
Yeah.
And I do commercials and lead-ins and announcements, and I don't know how many stations I'm on. I'm on a lot of stations right now, and it'll get better.
Yeah.
And every time I do anything, I get better at it. But I love having something to do where there's a learning curve.
I want to tie in the first story you told about calling Bob Seger and Mitch Ryder and having that experience. And how do you carry that attitude with you now? Almost 62 here in a couple weeks. Is that same kid that you were when you were 16, the lessons you learned, just the bold move, the confidence, and, staring down that stuff. Do you feel like you still carry that?
I think that's an interesting question, and I really think that there's a certain portion of us when we're young that gets hardwired.
Yeah.
And depending on what happened to us as kids, I mean, I had some terrible things happen to me, and it sort of made me afraid. And I think what happens is when we're abused children or when terrible things happen to us, we have two choices. We're either going to become afraid or we're going to say, all right, watch this.
Right.
No, that's not going to happen to me again.
Yeah.
I'll show you.
Right.
And that's the path I chose. And I tell you that I can't remember how I got their phone numbers, okay? But you see, that's not as important to me as the fact that I got it.
Exactly.
And the way that carries through into my life today is I don't think there's anything that I can't do if I decide to do it. If I decide tomorrow that I want to be a painter and put my paintings in a gallery, I would bet you $1 million that I will have a painting in a gallery within a year.
I wouldn't take that bet. I believe you.
I just believe that if I'm passionate about something and I want it, I'll find a way. Mm-hmm. And I don't. When I hear people say, "Oh, I can't get a job," or, I have to go do this instead of what I love, and or I can't. I'll tell you a common one is people who say too often, "I'm broke. I don't have any money." Okay. And they'll keep saying it. It'll be like an old tape. They keep saying it out loud. Those people stay broke. You know why? Because they believe it. They're putting it out in the universe that they're broke. Mm. They keep saying it over and over again.
Yeah.
How can you make any money if your belief system says you're broke? Mm. I think you have to exceed your grasp.
Yeah.
I will not take no for an answer if I want to accomplish something, even at my age. I do it differently.
Sure.
I'm not rude about it like I used to be.
Right.
I have a little more knowledge about how to be, politically correct and polite, and but the theory is the same.
The theory that success and failure is an illusion.
I believe it is. I believe my fear is the only thing that can stop me from doing anything. If I sit here and say I can't do something, it's not going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah, I believe it.
Do you believe that?
I do. My fear has affected me negatively many times. It has held me back, and I'm reaching a point in my life that I'm just
What changed your viewpoint?
Facing fears and either not having the desirable outcome but still learning, or actually achieving success like, wow, that wasn't so bad. What was I afraid of?
Right.
And just staying alive this long to experience those things. Jack, I appreciate you, man. You're a breed in your own right. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. Okay, thanks for doing this, and it's been my honor, my pleasure.
Thank you.
And
thank you.
I'm very grateful that I've been able to live a life that might might help somebody else somewhere along the line.
I think that's going to happen. Yeah, for sure. Thank you, dude.
Thanks, Matt.
So there is Jack White. As you probably can guess, a lot of these interviews go on a lot longer then I have time to post, so they are edited down for time and content, and we just spent a couple hours talking, and it was really awesome. And a big shout out to David Black for connecting me with Jack. I really enjoyed that time, and I hope you all did too. Thanks to Mike Jackson for his technical assistance, and tune in next week for Zach Albetta, where he will be the host. I want to let you know that Working Drummer Podcast is part of the Merge Network, which includes Nick Ruffini's Drummers Resource podcast, as well as Daniel Glass's podcast. Please check those two out. They're awesome. So again, thanks for listening, and I hope to see you around. Bye-bye.